Voltron, talk, get hit.
Welcome back to episode 3 of the Commander Replay podcast. Today we've got a topic that I'm super excited to talk about, which is Voltron. And even better yet, we've got two lovely guests joining me. Returning today is Peter, also known as Mono Whiteboarder on Twitter. Peter, how you doing today?
Hey PJ, thanks for using your Sun Titan trigger on me.
You're welcome. And also joining us today, we have our very special guest, Nathan, also known as the Hermit Druid. Nathan, tell us a bit about the content you create and what type of commander you like to play.
Hi, my name's Nathan. You might know me as the Hermit Druid on Twitter or OK Chef on TikTok. I create a bunch of different content, mostly because I have no idea about branding, and I am also just living live on the internet. So that's what I make. The kind of commanders that I play, mostly I play CDH and like competitive degenerate combo. But when I am not playing that kind of EDH, my favorite EDH to play is aggro Voltron, because like it's really what the spirit of Commander that like brings me to it, like the idea of having this hero that is like by your side while you fight like other evil wizards, like almost like JoJo's or like a Stand from Fate Knight, like the kind of like having your own hero that you suit up and attack people with. Like that's the kind of magic that really gets me like involved in the game.
Yeah. So I figured I would start this off with something real easy for you guys. What do you like most about Voltron?
I like having my win condition always ready to go. I get it exactly when I want it and whenever I want it, and it's always in my hand, and that really appeals to me.
Personally, it's a flavor. It's like if I wanted to like have like really cool, efficient win cons and whatnot, I'd play CDH. When I'm playing casual, I want to have this like Vorthosy interaction where me and my stand versus you. Let's go.
Sweet. So I think a couple of my favorite things about Voltron, because I've played Voltron for years and years, and it's like still one of my favorite archetypes. I like the flavor aspect of it. I like just having a lot of swords. I think it like flavor-wise, it's really cool. But two, it's also really good for breaking board stalls. I noticed like value decks have gotten really popular, and if there's just like a lot of creatures running around, the easiest way through that is like one giant thing with like double strike and trample. And you're like, well, they might have a bunch of 6/6s, but this is like a 30/30 with trample, so we'll just send that in, and that can still get through. Oh, and I think the final thing is just like, Voltron isn't really a thing in the other formats. Occasionally you see like an Aura Voltron deck with like Boggles or something. Boggles, but yeah, like other than that, like Voltron isn't really something you get to do in the other formats of Magic, so it's something that's like very uniquely Commander, which I love.
Yeah, it is like the most commander-ish, like to me, like it is like the spirit of Commander. It's like this is the legendary creature that is the head of my deck. One of my very first decks that I ever built before when I like first got into EDH years ago, I packed a Narset, and I always play monks in Dungeons and Dragons, and I was just like, oh man, all I need is a monk. This is going to be amazing. And I built it out of like all the draft chaff that I got from like opening up a couple boxes of cons. And It was a murder house. Like it was great.
Yeah, Narset is an incredibly strong commander.
Oh yeah, well that was my first taste of power, and it hasn't really changed since then.
Yeah, no, that's still an extremely powerful commander. Peter, what about you?
For me, the thing that I really like that got me attracted to Voltron was I love playing control. I think people think of Voltron as like an aggro strategy, and I always think of it as a control strategy. And like it's the closest in Commander you'll get to that classic control where you got your big giant creature that's your win condition, and then the rest of your hand is just answers and counter spells and removal and board wipes and things like that. So, instantly I was drawn to building some Voltron decks and making the game go long for everybody.
Yeah, I'm interested to dive more into that too as we get going, because
yeah, I think you and I play on opposite ends of the Voltron, because I try and end it as quickly as possible,
right.
Where you try and drag it out, which are both valid like Voltron to me, like you need to control the tempo of the game. You need to grab hold of how the game is going to be played and demand that it be played that way. So, like, if you're either going to take early advantage of the boards with, like, a bunch of fast mana, God bless Jeweled Lotus, because the amount of times that I have turn 1 or turn 2'd a 5-mana Shabraz off of the back of a Jeweled Lotus is, like, astounding. Either way, we can get into that part when we talk about mana, but, like, you either want to stacks people out and beat the crap out of them, or race them so fast and like jump on them before they can like even have a chance to like manage their game plan. But either way, you need to be in control of the tempo of the game from turn one.
Yeah, and so that's a great point. We'll get to it in a moment, but I have like this whole thing on like the key elements of what I think makes a good Voltron deck. And the one that's less intuitive for people either newer to the game or just don't play a lot of Voltron is that you need to stop what your opponents are doing. Because if your plan is creature with lots of swords, it's really easy for a value deck, some sort of green deck, to just like go way over the top of you. If they have a bunch of creatures and just go like Crater Hoof, that's hard to defend against. So some element of a good Voltron deck becomes about stopping your opponents in one way or another. Sometimes it's board wipes. I've really taken a liking to stacks. If I'm at the more powerful tables, I'll go for like Winter Orb or something like that.
I think that's another thing when we start talking about doing something good already, because like you end up layering your stacks build with like an Akiri, and now you're talking.
So I think that's a big thing. We'll use that to segue into this topic. I'll start with Peter. What do you think are the key elements for success in a Voltron deck?
Well, Nathan hit on one of my big ones, which is just doing something you want to do in the game of Magic. So I have two of my Voltron decks are Dakon and Radiant. And both of them, they have a game plan that culminates with a Voltron strategy, right? And so it might be worth it to kind of give our definitions of what we think Voltron is, too.
Yeah, go ahead.
Which mine would be a deck whose primary game plan is to deal lethal commander damage, usually in a quicker than normal fashion. So 1 or 2 turns, which is super vague and gives you a lot of room to play. So Dakon, the primary goal is to deal lethal damage with Dakon, but how do I do that? Well, I play lands, because Dakon's power is equal to the number of lands you control. With Radiant, I play flying creatures, because her power is equal to the number of flying creatures you control. And then, like Nathan said, from there you just decide, how do you want the tempo of the game to go? Do you want it to be a slow drag-out game? Do you want it to be an aggro game? Do you want it to be a mid-range game? Because Voltron, I think you really hit on it, PJ, where it's probably one of the easier strategies to pick up and understand. Okay, I have a big creature, I attack with it and deal 21 damage. But there's a lot more nuance once you actually start building your Voltron deck and all the directions that you can take it.
Yeah. Nathan, what about you? What do you think are your key elements for success, and how do you kind of define Voltron as a game plan?
I would also define Voltron exactly the way Pete did. Like the primary game plan is protect the queen. You have your powerful game piece, and you try to protect it and use it to deliver your game-winning punch. However, the only difference between how Mono White and I do it is because I am an ADHD like nut job, is I try to jump on people so hard and so fast that they don't it's turn one, we're slamming our creature. We are then making it huge and starting to start chipping away on 2, 3. Someone needs to die by turn 3. Ideally, turn 3, 4, you need to bodies need to be hitting the floor, because in a lot of cases, as you brought up, PJ, mono green decks will just strictly outvalue you. There's nothing you can do.
Yeah, they just get big and they go over the top.
Omnaths and all these things. These green things will constantly out, but what they can't do is, while they're playing their ramp on 2 and 3, you want to execute them.
Yeah. And so one of the things I used to do, if you follow my channel back 2-3 years, I used to try to aggro people out as fast as possible. And one of the things that I realized after a period of time of trying to do that is that, especially on Magic Online, where everyone has Mana Crypt, you can't aggro faster than they can combo, and especially not the table. And that's where I started developing this whole, you need to stop what your opponents are doing to buy yourself the time to be able to do that. And that's
where, in Sky Shark, the one of my favorite ways, it's hand destruction.
Yeah.
I don't actually, because it is my casual deck, I choose not to play Hull Breacher. I choose not to play Alms Collector, and I choose not to play Narset. However, if your opponents don't have a hand, it's going to be difficult. It's going to be really difficult for them to handle your creature.
Yeah, so there's a lot of ways to go about that, stopping your opponents. That's one of them, is hand disruption. You're empty-handed.
If they're empty-handed, or they can't put a game plan together, and at the same time, like my Wheel of Fortune just emptied their hand and put 7 counters on Shabraz. Shabraz is now a 10/10.
Yeah, it's giant, and they don't have anything to get rid of it.
And they have nothing to get rid of. Like, and heaven forbid a Hull Breacher hit the table. Or God forbid in that situation you end up landing a Smothering Tithe. It's just like,
good game.
Yeah, you essentially start chaining wheels together, and now you have a 50-50, 60-60 Shabraz. It's turn 4, and it's got trample and flying.
Yeah, hope you have a Swords to Plowshares.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
it's not going to look good for you.
Yeah, it's not. It's going to get ugly real quick.
So one of the ways that I define Voltron, I was actually going to do a video on this, and I haven't just because I got busy. But one of the things I thought about is I think it's just, for me, it's size and abilities. When I think of a Voltron creature, I want something huge, and I want it to have a lot of abilities on it. And that's Voltron to me. And there's a lot of ways to go about that. But being big by itself doesn't necessarily win you a game because people can block with like 1/1s and things. So it really kind of becomes about like what abilities do you also stack on top of there. And someone mentioned that defining it as commander damage only, which for me, yeah, my primary plan is usually 21 commander damage, but I find, you don't always have your commander and things go wrong. So like now you're on a Pure Steel Paladin because your commander got blown up too many times, and well, we need to make this Pure Steel Paladin huge, and we need to give it protection from like 4 colors and get like trample and lifelink and all kinds of other stuff on there. And that's kind of how I define Voltron.
Right. Voltron's no different than any other strategy. You have to have a backup plan. If you're all in on one thing, and that thing gets stopped, then you're done for. And
which is as we're talking like combo backup.
Yeah, so this is actually a cool topic. Peter, what do you use as your backup plan in your Voltron decks?
So in Dakon, my backup plan is things like Field of the Dead or kind of token producers that care about lands. Field of the Dead being the newest one and the most notable. In Radiant, she's powered up by flyers. And all those flyers can carry equipment just as well as Radiant can. They might not be as big, but they're still creatures that can carry equipment. And most of them are hate bears. So Radiant's plan is disrupt my opponents preemptively with little guys and then slam in with Radiant. If I can't get my Radiant through, then it's going to be, let's turn these little guys and make them into my new combat-centric win condition. It's still combat-oriented, though.
Yep.
For me, at least.
Nathan, what about you?
That's where my combo comes out. Primarily speaking, though, one of my favorite win conditions, actually in EDH right now, like for casual, and like my favorite Voltron backup win condition is Chandra's Ignition.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
That's a good one. Yeah,
that's a real good one.
Because like it's a good card on its own because it's a board wipe for everything except your Voltron creature.
One-sided board wipe.
It's a one-sided board wipe that protects you. Yeah, that protects your creature. It damages other players, and it can also be a win condition. Because when your point is to get one creature really strong or like really big, you're going to you can capitalize on that by just blowing everybody up with a Chandra's Ignition.
Yep.
Like I've seen it used in feather decks. I use it to great effect in my Shabraz list because it is easy to get Shabraz up to 30. It is very easy.
Yeah.
It also circumvents one of the inherent weaknesses of Voltron, which is normally you're trying to take out one player and then you're moving on to another player. You're taking out each player at an individual time. Where in Commander, a lot of times what you see is people try and take out the whole table at once. Chandra's Ignition lets you do that in a Voltron shell.
And you're using your Voltron creature, so it's just like it's really like for that deck.
Yeah, and the thing that I like too is that I'll use this as an example. I was facing a Coma recently. Coma is terrible for Voltron decks because they just sack a Serpent and tap your thing, and it's awful. So if you don't have Hexproof, then it's really difficult to get that combat damage in. Something like Chandra's Ignition is going to give you that damage without having to successfully attack.
There's 2 cards, I think, that were specifically printed in Commander Legends that ripped the Voltron strategy, maybe 3. Commander Legends really helped.
Yeah, Commander Legends was insane for Voltron decks.
Commander Legends was insane for Voltron because for my particular strategy of Voltron of hit hard, hit fast, and don't give up until everybody stopped moving, cards like Jeweled Lotus are amazing.
Yeah, it makes you so unbelievably fast.
Like that gets down your beloved Aurelia like turns faster.
Quickly.
It makes
Yeah, very
colored
quickly.
mana.
Believe it or
But
not,
like
I actually don't use it in Aurelia just because it's not to say that you couldn't, but I've kind of got a whole thing worked out with Aurelia now where like Aurelia is kind of the late game play. I use her
yeah,
like
you
an extra
top end.
Yeah, I use her like an extra combat spell, and for the most part, I'm putting swords on like hate bears and pure steel paladins, stuff like that early. And then once I'm ready for Aurelia, she comes in. Because if you play her too early, then someone's just gonna swords it the second that you cast her, and then that's a terrible time.
Fair. For me, it's usually being like cast Shabraz on turn 2.
It's two different angles, right? You can cast it so early that if they don't have the removal spell, they're done for.
Yeah.
If you can't cast it that early, though, you can wait till everyone's run out
later.
of.
Yeah, exactly. That's like
attrition is a powerful tool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the different strategies of Voltron. Like it's why it's not a one-trick pony. It's just not.
Here's a big one. You talked about attrition. Aurelia has haste. Sir Gwyn does not. And that makes Aurelia so much better for going late because people can cast creature board wipes all day long and you just don't care. If your artifacts are still there, you recast Aurelia, resuit it, and you're still getting damage in because of the haste. And that's like, I can't overstate how good that is. Compared to Sir Gwyn, same mana cost, the free equip is nice, the card draw is great, but the fact that it doesn't naturally have haste means that you need to either devote a lot of card slots to haste or just hope that you have one of them in play. And if you don't have that same ability to really get through a lot of removal in the late game. And, that's one of the reasons that I keep coming back to Aurelia is that if you want to win that war of attrition, haste is so good for doing that.
It's funny that you bring that up because in Dakon, I've recently tried experimenting with no haste. So Dakon, the goal is really to just make the game go so long that my opponents just run out of things to do. I grind through all of their value engines. I grind through all of their card advantage, and I'm left with card advantage and a really big creature that I can cast over and over and over again and just try and run you out of removal. So far, it just makes for miserable games that when I win, no one has fun except me.
Yeah, I believe that's the Esper misery archetype.
Yes, it's my favorite. when I get competitive, that's what I go to.
Oh, yeah.
See, I just like to do something crazy. I like to throw cards around.
Yeah. Before we get too far along, I wanted to mention my favorite backup win plan, which is Mob Rule. It's basically mini Insurrection, and it's so good. Like, every time I've cast a Mob Rule, it was either game-winning or about to win me the game and someone had a counterspell or something like that. And, like, it's not always perfect. Obviously, it needs some setup, and sometimes you have to wait a little while. But the fact that it's 6 mana and not 8, like Insurrection, means that you can cast it at a lot of different points and still probably do other things in your turn. And the big deal is that you can win from not having a board state. If someone swords or path your commander and it was the only thing you had, if they still have creatures, you're just like, well, fire this Mob Rule, take out a player or two that I need to get rid of, and now we're good. Life is good. We're back where we need to be, and love Mob Rule so much. Thinking about some other key elements for success, I know one of the things we talked about is like keeping your commander on the battlefield. One of my key elements is protection. You got to protect your commander.
Yeah, 100%. You got to protect your win con no matter what. In this case, it just happens to be a really large creature.
Yeah. What do you guys like to use for protection effects?
Personally, being like a CDH spell slinger, counters, other amazing things that we got recently, like Deflecting Swat and Fierce Guardianship. Woo!
Yeah, those are crazy cards.
All the most those commanders, like even the white one that what gives your commander indestructible, doesn't it?
Yeah, Fearless Maneuver or something.
Yeah, like I've never played it. Like it's not my particular cup of tea. It's not a counter spell, but like those free commander spells are just like a boon to the commander, to the Voltron style.
And in white, that's what you're working with usually. I'm usually using something that gives indestructible. There's that card that you can sacrifice a spirit to give target non-spirit creature indestructible. I use that in Radiant, and it's looked really good. You have Selfless Spirit who sacrifices himself to get indestructible. So the problem is that those things don't get rid of exile, where a counter spell would protect you from exile. So Things like hexproof. You know, Commander's Plate from Commander Legends, going back to that one that Nathan mentioned earlier. Commander's Plate is a huge boon to your monocolored Voltron strategies.
Oh, yeah, it's great for 1 and 2 color.
Yeah, you know, if I throw that in Radiant, then she has protection from 4 different colors. That's crazy. That's Animar levels of protection.
Yeah. So the thing that's crazy about that card too is that it's protection and evasion and size all in one card. And when I kind of did my thing on what I think Voltron is, its abilities and its size, that's giving you both. In my mind, I've got these subcategories of abilities that I want. So some things that I want, you want your standard keywords with, you know, first strike, double strike, your combat stuff, vigilance is all really good. Then you got like some secondary things that you want, like lifelink can be really good. But then you get down to the protection and the evasion mechanics. The fact that this thing's giving you protection and evasion on one card with size for an aggressive mana cost is so many things. It's so many things in one card, and it's been great for me. I haven't tried it in a 3-color deck. I'm curious to see how that goes. It probably loses a little bit of effectiveness doing that, but still really, really solid.
We can transition into talking just about, I think one of the mistakes that a lot of Voltron players make is they rely too heavily on equipment. So they put all these equipment in their deck, and then when they don't have their commander, those equipment don't do anything.
Yeah.
So picking
you do need a creature for them.
Yeah, picking the right equipment and then making sure that equipment functions in your deck without your commander is like a critical thing to figure out and learn the balance of.
And yeah, that kind of comes down to like balancing your deck from a construction standpoint. How many creatures do you have versus how many equipment? And that's something that I always pay a lot of attention to. And I find that the number shifts from deck to deck. It's not the same across the board. It kind of depends on what's the CMC of your commander and what kind of other abilities do they have. You know, something like a Shram can support a really high number of equipment because you're constantly drawing cards.
That reminds me of my other 2 favorite Boros commanders from Commander Legends. Rograk and Arden.
Oh, yeah.
Right, yeah.
Arden is an insane
How can we forget talk about Arden? Like, I don't like equipment, personally. I think it's expensive. Like, it's not my style of Voltron.
Yep.
However, Arden takes all of my problems and just goes, yeah, you don't have that problem anymore.
Yeah. Oh, it's an incredible card. It's ridiculous, honestly.
And then like Rograk coming down on 1.
Yep.
I have died to a Rograk with 26 copies of Bloodforged Battle Axe attached to it.
Nice.
Well, and Rograk's a 0/1. Like, you don't need your commander to be intrinsically high power in order like high power and toughness.
Yeah, but it's got keyword soup. As PJ mentioned earlier, it doesn't really, like, the power is not necessarily as important as the evasion.
Like I said, it's a 2-part equation.
Menace and trample? Like,
it's that 2-part equation. It's size and its abilities. Rograk has the abilities. You just got to get a little bit of size on it, and
well,
it's
all of a sudden you freely attach Rograk with Arden with like any equipment.
Yeah, anything with power on it.
Stupid.
Yeah, it's so mana efficient to play that deck. I've actually tried to make that deck work at the CDH level. Haven't had a lot of success with it yet.
You want to talk about CDH Voltron, because I think I'm ready to talk about that.
You ready to talk about it? Peter, you ready to talk about it?
Yeah, I'll probably take a back seat because, as you know, I'm on the opposite end of the spectrum.
Let's do it. Let's roll.
So the one card that I alluded to, 2 of the cards that I alluded to earlier that really mess up the start with the equations and with our math and sort of like brings things to a potential CDH level of Voltron was the introduction of Jessica and Dargo. Dargo is one of those commanders that everybody thought was like really cute and like, oh, it's a big fat pirate, but I have struggled to build him fairly.
I can see that. Wow. There's a lot of words on that card.
I have struggled to build Dargo fairly. He is a combo storm machine in the command zone, and like he's a 7/5 that potentially comes down on turn 1.
It's pretty early,
and you don't even need stupid cards. You need a mountain, Tormund's Crypt, and like maybe like a Skirk Prospector or something, and you've got Dargo on 1, or like a Tormund's Crypt. Like playing 0-drop good artifacts, you drop out a couple of those, and you've got for 1 red and for 6 colorless, which is paid for by sacrificing artifacts. It's very easy for Dargo to come down on 1.
Wow.
Which means on turn 2, you now have a 7/5 Trampler. Things get really really messed up when you have Jessica in the command zone, because that means you're able to play Jessica on 2, immediately zero her to triple the output of damage, and straight up kill somebody when they have played their first dork.
7
they have
times
played
3 is really good in Commander.
7 times 3, 21, they are dead.
Yeah.
And I have tested this deck out on numerous occasions, and it's not even like it's a glass cannon for sure, but like you end up throwing like a Blood Moon or a 8-ball, or sorry, a 3-ball, not an 8-ball, like a Trinisphere in that, and lock people out of the game, and like attack intelligently. You could easily win the game by turn 4.
Yeah, that's
Easily
super fast. I did want to try that one out, and I haven't played it at all. But yeah, I was thinking something like that would be possible. Where you're just like,
you also have combo backup, because Jessica provides Jessica was one of the largest boons to a Voltron strategy, because not only does she triple damage, which is stupid. However, she also has a combo outlet for the amount of time she does damage based on the amount of times one of your commanders being cast out of the command zone. So what you do in your Dargo deck is you have a backup Dockside Extortionist and like Cloudstone Curio plan, an infinite mana plan, and then infinitely cast Jessica out of the command zone to blow everybody up should the Dargo plan not work.
Yep.
Like, that seems like it might be like difficult, but considering the amount of goblin related tutors and goblin related artifact tutors that have been printed over the last decade, it's pretty easy to assemble. And plus, you're already playing 0-drop creatures. Because of trying to turbo out Dargo, you're already playing Kobolds of Carekeep.
Yep.
Why? Because it's 0 mana.
Right.
You're playing Memnite. Why? Because it's 0 mana. You're playing Ornithopter. Why? It's 0 mana. All these Cloudstone targets that double up with Dockside are all ways to power out your Dargo.
Right. Let me ask you this. So I've been playing some CDH. I haven't been playing like a ton of it recently, but the feeling that I've been getting is that where CDH feels like it is right now to me is people are just like, I'm just going to tap out and go for it. Have you been seeing that?
Well, yes, because I'm usually the person that's going turn 2 ad nos. Any responses? Nope. Yep, I'm going to draw 30 cards and win.
Right, and the cards for Voltron have gotten a lot better with Commander Legends and over the past year. However, I think a lot of decks were actually easier to play as Voltron and CEDH. So I was playing Akiri Bruce in 2019, well before Winota and well before like the newest crop of insane cards have come out. And I think it was actually easier to play Voltron then because everyone had to leave up counter magic for Flash Hulk. And so everyone would kind of just stall for a little while, waiting to get through all the counter spells. And that was a perfect time for me to just go, Akiri, suited up, start attacking you. And
Akiri Jessica has been something that a buddy of mine has been playing around with.
Yep.
And something that I've also kind of like messed around with. Like Bruce gave Akiri double strike and lifelink, right?
Yep.
Jessica straight up will triple damage.
Yep.
So again, like Dockside Extortionist. Dockside Extortionist almost becomes player removal.
Yeah. Oh my god, that card's ridiculous.
Because you play Dockside Extortionist, get 7 treasures. You now have a 8/3, 9/3 Akiri.
Yep.
You look at somebody that doesn't have blockers, you smile politely at them, and then you send a Jessica. You triple Jessica and delete them.
Hi.
So while I, the Turbo Nos player, will spend turns 1 and 2 dumping everything out, like every mana vault out of my hand, where the Akiri player goes, okay, that's fun, delete you.
Yep.
With stacks backup, with like, okay, now I'm going to play this rule of law, and now I'm going to start punching all of you guys until you stop moving.
Yeah, and that was the key. I think that's still the key to playing Voltron and CEDH is you need the right stacks piece. Like you need that rule of law or a deafening silence, just something that's going to stop your opponents. And that's kind of the thing that I talked about even for casual Magic too, is that you need that thing that stops what your opponents are doing because Voltron is great, but there are a lot of ways that people can just like, they can combo kill you. They can go over the top if they have just like a go wide army and things like that. So being able to like prevent them from their win condition is a huge part of it. A card we haven't talked about, but it's great for CEDH. And I've been wanting to use it more in casual, just because of the way casual is going. But Silence, I think, is a really good card.
Silence is a CEDH staple.
Yeah. And I'm very sad that I traded one of my binder.
Play white. Silence is one of the reasons why you play white.
Yeah.
There is in CDH. There's probably about like 10 cards, maybe 7 to 10 cards as to why you want to play white, and that's one of them.
Yeah, absolutely. And my time from getting slapped around in CEDH pretty hard with Akiri Bruce has kind of taught me a lot about how to play it in casual. And that's where I kind of developed this, like, need to protect my guy, need to stop my opponents from doing what they're doing. Now, if I'm at a casual table, I'll rein it back some. Like, if we're talking high power and CDH decks, Winter Orb is one of my favorites. It combos with Feast and Famine, it combos with Neheb. Also, it just stops people from doing stuff, and if your creature is bigger and more threatening, you're probably going to win that race. But as I shift down to like...
It just sucks when you get outraced by a Grixis deck that's on every single mana rock known to man.
Yeah, and that's where, like, you wouldn't run Null Rod generally, but Meltdown is a surprisingly good card. Or just, like, Rule of Law them, and they can only cast one thing.
Yeah, Rule of Law.
Yeah.
Turn one Deafening Silence is what you're mulling to.
Yeah.
Also, the fact that they basically printed a red Force of Will with Deflecting Swat.
Oh my god. Yeah, it's so good. A card I've been starting to use too is Bolt Bend, which is
great.
A budget Deflecting Swat, because Deflecting Swat has gotten very expensive. And
I was going over Godot yesterday with a friend for reasons, and I was looking at the counter package that Mono Red has access to.
It's not bad. It's not bad.
It is not bad. Like, it keeps getting better. Like, it keeps getting, like, it's like frightening. Like, it's got Deflecting Swat, Pyroblast, Bolt Bend, Ricochet Trap, Red Elemental Blast. Like, it's like there's like 5 counters that are like actually playable.
Yeah. Now you've got Tybalt's Trickery.
Tybalt's Trickery, Jesus Christ, it's just a 2-mana counterspell. Like, sure, you could give them their Adnaz or Peer into the Abyss, but whatever, they're probably going to get a mana rock.
Yeah, so most Voltron decks contain either red or white, and a lot of them do have red in them. Run Tybalt's Trickery. That's just, like, too good of a card not to, because someone's going to play some big nasty thing at any level. In your case, it's going to be Adnaz. For, like, me and Peter, it's probably, like, Torment of Hellfire or Craterhoof or something dumb like that. And just be like, nope, counter that. You know,
if they're playing a Craterhoof Behemoth, literally anything they pull out of their goddamn deck is going to be better than that goddamn Craterhoof Behemoth hitting the table.
Even if they, like, cascade into an Ugin is probably still better for you than that.
Yeah, fine. Like, board white, that's fine. It's better than me dying.
Yeah.
You're still alive, exactly.
I'm still alive, like, don't care. We survived another day.
So I'll use this to segue into, what do you guys think the struggles of Voltron are? And Peter, you can go first.
Yeah, so I'm curious what your guys' thoughts are, because this is a classic question with Voltron, of how do you dole out the damage? Do you pick one person and then you're going to focus on them the entire time, or are you going to try and divvy it up amongst the players as you play the game and just kind of reanalyze every combat step who you need to be swinging at?
It depends.
Yeah, like, that's a good answer. That's the correct answer. Because a lot of people,
initially, I'll try and kill the person that I think has, like, the combo player, the most interaction. The person that has the best answer to what I am doing dies first.
Yes.
Yep.
No matter what. It's just one of those, like, I am so sorry, but you have to die.
Yeah, and so it depends on the damage scaling of your deck. I think that matters a lot. So, like I talked about with Aurelia now, it's kind of become... Here's the way my Aurelia deck plays. I want to touch on this before we get too far along. Is that the first half of that deck is basically value through combat. You guys mentioned wanting to do things that you already want to do in Commander. So I'm using Sword of the Animist to ramp. I'm using Dousing Dagger to ramp. I'm using Mask of Memory to get extra cards. That's kind of the early part of my game. I'm not doing excessive amounts of damage before turn 5, probably. Mm-hmm. And then I use all that value that I've generated to really kind of explode for damage, maybe turns 5 through 7. So I can poke some people early that aren't my primary target. I might just be like, here's 2 or 3 your way, here's 2 or 3 your way. Even though I have that target in my mind, I'm trying to not tip my hand about who's going to get blasted once I'm online. And like, all right, turn 6, Aurelia, maybe Blackblader Forge is in play, maybe Arden's in play, free equip, someone's dying. I'll try not to tip my hand about who that player is going to be, but it will be the player that I'm going to have the hardest time interacting. So someone that has a Rift, a green deck, maybe that has like Kodama in the command zone, or, you know, some value engine that looks like it's going to be a real problem for me. Or if it's just like mono black. Mono black is a nightmare, like a good mono black deck, because they're probably not going to attack. They're going to use their graveyard a lot. They're going to tutor for the thing they need when they need it most. And that's like all really scary stuff. So, I'm kind of thinking about those things in my mind, and that's how I'll choose my targeting. But I will refocus every turn also if, the balance of power kind of shifts.
I think that's the most important thing, is I think some people get lost in the, well, I start attacking this person. If I don't keep attacking them, then I wasted that attack. And that's your classic sunk cost fallacy. Like, you need to analyze each turn who the person you need to attack is. And sometimes the best play is, I can remove a person from the game. That's a very powerful decision to make, and I should make that decision. Yeah. But other times you need to refocus and target, a player falls behind and you need to target the player that's getting ahead now.
Yep, exactly.
Like, sometimes just getting in like an early hit of combat damage, like before moving on to somebody else, means you can come back and finish them off easier.
I think there's two numbers that are important. It's 21 is important, but I think 10 and 11 are also important. It's pretty easy, I think, to get to about 10 or 11 commander damage in a single swing. So if you get somebody incidentally to that, it means that, okay, now that person's at 1 attack until that time comes, rather than 2 attacks.
Yeah. Another thing I think about too is, like, Nathan just kind of mentioned it, is that I don't want someone to be at 40 on turn 8. So if I chip them for 2 or 3 early and then someone else chips them for 3 or 4, at least maybe they're around 30. Maybe they crack some fetches. They're down to 25. And it's a lot easier to alpha strike someone at 25 than it is from 40. It's still really hard to do 40 damage all in one shot. You need like a lot of cards and a lot of things to have gone right to get to that place. So
or one really big shark.
Yeah. In your case, one really big shark, and that's kind of what I was mentioning earlier, is that like the damage scaling of your deck matters also.
Yeah, like that's what I do. For the Jeskai pair of Brawl and Shabraz, like they just get huge.
Yep.
Like even in CDH, you like shark beats on like Brawl and Shabraz Curiosity is a viable win in situation. Like when everything has gone terribly.
Yep.
You just beat the crap out of them with Shabraz.
Right.
Because you wheel once, it's a 10-10. You wheel twice, it's 17.
Yeah, that's huge. That's massive. Like,
it's massive.
And what's cool about that is that, like, you don't really need to do much else. Like, you play that one wheel, and then it's just huge. And, like, you don't need other cards for that strategy, really. Where
I don't run any equipment in that deck. I think I run a Lightning Greaves, just, like, but for haste and protection.
Yep.
But the rest of the deck is, like, I don't need equipment when I am playing Mystic Remora.
Yeah. One of the things I thought about, I've always wanted to build this deck and I just haven't gotten around to it, is doing a very similar thing, but with Ishai. And at this point, it would probably be Jeska would be the backup.
I'm actually building Ishai and Jeska right now. I have it is my JoJo build. I actually have altars made of Star Platinum and one of the JoJo characters.
Nice.
But the game plan is turn 1 Ishai, wait for everybody to play Magic.
Yep.
Get them to 7. Like, they need to cast 6 spells. And then you cast Jeska and you delete somebody.
Yep. I've been wanting to build that one. I'm curious to see how your deck turns out.
Backup plan of Isochron Scepter and Dramatic Reversal for infinite mana to blow everybody up with Jeska.
Yep.
And you're in Jeskai, so you can tutor artifacts and instants and sorceries pretty frickin' easy.
Yeah.
And all you need to do is protect and force through Ishai.
Yeah,
while other people play Magic.
I want you to send me that list when it's done.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think we were talking about where Voltron struggles. I think that's what we were on. We were talking about the counter spells. And one of the things that I think kind of comes up is, if you listen to like some other podcasts, they'll talk about it in a way that's like a little bit disingenuous, which is that the second someone plays a Fleshbag Marauder, your Voltron deck is like completely dead in the water, which I don't think is true. And actually, I know it's not true, but Mono Black is not a great time, or Black X decks are not a great time. I think Fleshbag Marauder is one of the problems. So one of the things that I've kind of like realized is that you do want to have other creatures in your deck. You do want to have Pure Steel Paladins, your Stoneforge Mystics, even just like a Hate Bear, something that you can feed. What's that?
Partners,
yeah. Partners changes the equation. You can run very few creatures in your deck when you have partners.
Partners is a huge boon.
Yeah, but What other struggles do you think Voltron decks have? Like I said, like the mono black stuff can be really scary if you're not prepared for it.
Look, they might say that Fleshbag is not a problem, but then you put a goddamn Fire Shrieker on a Sigarda, and you say what problem?
I just play Hushbringer.
Yeah.
Hushbringer shuts off so many problems for Voltron decks. You're just like, oh, Crater Hoof, nope. Fleshbag, nope.
I guess that's maybe where I'm coming from, like coming off the back of like, I don't know, 3 months, 4 months of playing webcam Magic with a lot of content creators, with Brawl and Shabraz. What my feelings on where Voltron is lacking is starting to become less and less.
Yeah.
Where is Voltron? Like, it depends on your color. Like, it really more depends on your colors and your strategy. Like, if you are playing, as we are talking about, a good strategy that you are considering your tempo and you have the proper card quality that you need to do that, you are going to run into a lot less issues than you think that you're going to.
Yep.
Yeah, part of the area where Voltron struggles is the perception. It's just like White is currently. People assume it's bad, so they just stop trying to think about it.
Yep.
And a lot of the reasons they assume it's bad are the reasons that would make it bad. So, I'm completely reliant on one card in my command zone that everyone can see is coming. Well, you're not completely reliant on that card. You can put other things in your deck. You're allowed to play other creatures and other strategies inside of your Voltron deck. It's just your Voltron deck has a win condition in the command zone, which not everybody can say that they have that in their deck. And that's a really big boon, is having your win condition in your hand, but not in your deck. You'll never draw your win condition that could be dead depending on the situation. It's always just tucked away in your command zone. Can't be interacted with besides, say, a Nevermore. And when you're ready,
or a Drannith Magistrate.
I draw. Yeah, right. Nevermore, a Drannith Magistrate, which put some interaction in to interact with those things. The nice thing is, those are weaknesses, right? So then you can target those specific weaknesses and say, okay, I'm not going to get locked out by those cards.
And even if you do, you should have a pivot plan. Like,
Yeah.
if you do not have a backup plan, that's your fault, not Voltron's.
Right.
One thing that Voltron does struggle with is that there are a lot of interaction points.
Yes.
From creature in your command zone to dealing 21 commander damage. There's a lot of points at which your opponent can say, I have a response. And that's probably one of the biggest weaknesses.
And
which can also be halted by, say, a Grand Abolisher.
Yeah, it really can. But, like, to me, that's also what makes it fun.
Right.
And fair. Like, compared to the stupid that I'm usually up to. If I kill somebody with Voltron damage and whatnot, I'm like, yeah, that's on you.
Yeah, it's I'll use this phrase a lot on the channel, which is the second you run out of removal, you die.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, oh, your entire deck folds to removal. It's like, yeah, do you fucking have it?
Yeah, that's the question. Do you have it right now?
Do you have it right now? Like, everybody's like, oh, you're just gonna die. It's like, okay, so you're going to mull to 5 so you have a Path to Exile in your hand, and then you're about to tell me my deck isn't threatening?
Yeah.
You just mulled to 5 for Path to Exile, and you're like, I'm not scared of you. You just mulled to 5.
Yeah, which, once again, you're going to win the game of attrition most times in that chance, because your commander isn't a resource from your hand. You lose your commander, kind of, right? You have to recast it, but it's still a card that you have access to. You aren't really going down a card. So when someone removes your commander, that's another important thing about Voltron, is how much resources are you sinking into your commander? Because the less resources you sink in that have no other purpose besides your commander, the less valuable removal becomes against your commander. So when they Path to Exile, they spent a card. They don't have that card anymore, but you can still just recast your commander, say, next turn or the turn after that or whenever.
Yeah, it's the same thing, though, like why you don't even bother removing Thrasios and CDH.
Yep, just going to come back.
It's like, Thrasios is just going to, in response, draw a card, replace itself, and come down for 4 mana. It's like, you may as well just try and, like, worry about anything else.
Yep.
Other than trying to keep that Thrasios off the board, because it's just going to fucking be there.
Yep.
Like, it's like where the Rograk Arden thing is like, okay, so you just pathed my Rograk. I cast it for 2 mana. Let's go.
Yeah, there were a lot of good things in there that I want to touch on. When you kind of get to the next level of Voltron, so like, there's kind of like, you start out, you're like, okay, I jam all my equipments. I died to this Fleshbag Marauder. Let's figure that out. Okay, we've got a few creatures. Having played Voltron as long as I have, I've kind of gotten to this point now where you start thinking about like threat density and your question of, do you have the removal? And if you play a Hushbringer and that Hushbringer shuts off things that their deck is doing. Now they're spending removal on that Hushbringer, not on your commander.
Which is the benefit to the stacks package.
Yep. And, same thing is true with, okay, now I present you with, there's a Winter Orb in play and a Feast and Famine in play. Which one of those are you going to shoot? Because you can only shoot one of them. As you start layering like this, you put people
And not
into
only did you do that, not only are you staxing people out with your Winter Orb and your Null Rod, sorry, not your Null Rod, your
Rule of Law.
Your Curse Totem. Like your Curse Totem, your Winter Orb, and your Feast and Famine that you're all playing, that is also subsequently making your Akiri huge.
Right. And
so that's that layering of having your stuff.
Right. And it's like they get forced into this position of like, well, I can kill the thing that's stopping my deck from doing its thing, or I can use the removal on the thing that's going to kill me, but then the other one survives and it's still a problem for me. So you can kind of get to this place now where your deck is full of your deck is like densely I can't say this. Damn
your
it.
deck is densely packed with threats.
Yes, that's what I'm trying to say. Thank you.
Well, there is a very famous Magic player by the name of Brian Keebler that once said the best answer is a good threat. That is paraphrased. That is 100% paraphrased. I believe his quote was closer to, there are such thing as wrong answers, but there is no such thing as a wrong threat.
Ah, yes. And, that's that choice that you put your opponents into. It's like, oh, crap. You see certain commanders across from you and just like, if I don't have removal, I'm just going to die. Like if I see an opponent on Sir Gwyn, you're just like, this is going to go poorly. And, one of the things I notice is that when I build online, I run more removal. When I build in paper, a lot of the times I'll run a bit less removal. And it's just because like when I play in paper, it tends to be a little bit more chill. So, I cut the removal count just a little bit, just so I'm not that guy that's just completely destroying.
I increased my amount of targeted removal in Voltron, but I actually like cut back on the amount of board wipes, like compared to like what the recommended 5 board wipes.
Oh, I've got stories for you on board wipes.
Pardon?
I've got stories for you on board wipes. I've done some polls on like Twitter and YouTube and all that to figure out how many board wipes people are running these days. And 4 to 5 used to be like the gold standard. If you go back further than 5 years, it's probably like 6 or 7. But people are running like 2 to 3 board wipes quite a bit now. Like that's how low
felt
number.
In games I've played recently too. It's like I'm the one with the board wipe and no one else has any.
Exactly. And do you know how powerful that is as a tool?
Yeah.
When you're the one with the removal, like you kind of dictate the pace of the game, and everyone else just like play my value and then lose it to the thing. But
in Sky Shark, I don't want a board wipe ever.
Right, because you're just trying to go faster than them, or if you're not faster, you're just going to go over or around them. Right?
Yeah. Like I play Cyclonic Rift, and that is it.
Where in my Dakon deck, I have a bunch of board wipes that destroy everything but leave me with Dakon.
Yeah.
So that's my way. That's my evasion.
One-sided board wipes win games.
Like
also, if there is ever a strategy where you wanted to play mass land destruction,
Voltron is it. Mass land destruction is still risky, though. It's not my favorite.
Oh, it's 100% risky, but my favorite way of doing it is having a whole bunch of artifact mana on board.
Yep.
And a 20-20, 25-25 Sky Shark, and like Sunder. Enjoy.
Sunder. Gross.
Sunder into a wheel. Have fun.
Yeah, that's actually a good one. I hadn't thought about.
Get to draw.
Exactly. I have, like, in one game that I was playing with my friends, I wheeled and sundered, put everybody's lands back into their hand, and the windfall that I cast ended up putting, because I had all my lands in my hand, ended up blowing almost everybody up off of Brawlin, and then putting a huge amount of it was like it's a Hail Mary.
Right.
But like maybe less cards like Armageddon, and maybe more cards like Sunder and Fall of Thran.
Mm-hmm.
Because Fall of Thran is like, oops, I didn't kill everybody. I get 2 lands back.
Yep.
Sunder is less mass land destruction than it is a major tempo play.
Yeah, so one of the big things with Sunder that I like is, now I haven't played it, but I'm just from listening to you talk about it, is that the problem with Armageddon is that if someone plays a Heroic Intervention, you're probably going to lose now.
Yes.
Heroic Intervention, Boros Charm, Teferi's Protection. And that's why I've kind of shifted away from that. And that's why I like Winter Orb, because Winter Orb it's generally much harder to stop that Winter Orb. Like, their protection spell isn't going to save them against the Winter Orb. And then even if they shoot the Winter Orb, you don't lose your lands. Your lands are still there.
You actually get your lands back.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why I've really taken a liking to that one, because there's a lot of ways that mass land destruction can go wrong. Sunder, on the other hand, Heroic Intervention and Boros Charm doesn't save that. Teferi's Protection will, but...
I honestly haven't seen it Teferi's Protection a lot, but you know what? Counterspell deals with that.
Yeah, Counterspell deals with most things, right? But
you don't have to play, like, land destruction. It's just an avenue to go down, right?
Yeah.
Stacks, land destruction, they're all just avenues to go down, because in the end, Voltron is a lot more flexible of a strategy than people think it is.
Right.
Like, it's because everybody says it's not good, so they don't explore it.
Right.
Yeah. Same problem with mono white. It's think about what deck you want to play. Like, think about, I want to play Voltron deck, and then think about what decks do you like to play, and just smash them together. Like, I want to play, like, so Nathan, you like playing combo, right? And you like playing Voltron, and you just smashed them together. You have a combo deck with a Voltron win con. That's it.
I have two.
I like playing control, so my Voltron decks are control decks. PJ likes taking a lot of combats.
Takes
a lot of combats.
I have to devote a small segment to Waves of Aggression, because
we can talk about the clock. That's Waves of Aggression is...
Waves of Aggression removes the clock. Waves of Aggression is a wonderful, wonderful Magic card that needs to be reprinted because they're getting kind of expensive. Yeah, so the clock is a great point. We'll talk about that. So one of the things I've noticed is there's like each commander, depending on what it does, has these like weird mathematical places that you want to be. For Aurelia, you want to get to +3/+3 and double strike or double damage. And that'll give you commander lethal. That'll give you 22 damage against a player if you take both attacks with the double strike. Other decks have like different mathematical breakpoints that they want to get to.
Rafik.
Sir Gwyn, I found, is a little bit weird. That's probably where you want to get to like 11 with the double strike.
Rafik is some math as well.
For the decks that you guys play, what are like the important mathematical breakpoints?
Both of mine. So I have Radiant and Dakon as my primary Voltron list, and both of mine, Dakon is 21. Dakon, I want him to be a 21-21. So those games can take a long time.
Yep.
Radiant though, however, is honestly, Radiant usually is like a 7, I feel like, and then I just submit that it'll take me a couple more turns than I'd like to kill with Radiant.
Yep.
But she's sneaky because she's so variable with how she shoots up. So she can shoot up to a 21-21 depending on how the game goes. I played a game where someone cast Dovescape, and so Radiant became very scary very fast.
Yeah. Dovescape, great lockout card. Talking about stopping your opponents, that's one way to do it.
If you want to play Voltron and you have a Rogue's Passage in your deck, Dovescape is a great way to ensure your Voltron strategy.
Yeah. One thing
then you just play Tygam.
Yeah.
Play Tygam, Voltron, Dovescape so that you can actually cast spells through the Dovescape where nobody else can. Have fun.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's cool. I like that.
Because Tygam, whenever you attack, which is something you want to be doing anyway,
Yep.
makes all your spells uncounterable and gives them rebound. You know what is awesome with that strategy? Turns.
Yeah. I haven't played the turns Voltron deck yet. I'll probably get there at some point, but that's
turns is just like extra combats, but it's blue, so it's better.
But more, yeah.
Yeah.
Because you can not only do get an extra combat, you get an extra land drop, and you get an extra card draw, and you get to an extra main phase and 2 extra main phases.
Yeah, I look at it in the inverse, which is that an extra combat is like 40% of an extra turn.
Yeah, exactly. But like for some reason, they both cost 5 mana.
Yeah.
Yeah, just as a segue, but like Tygam turns, you cast a turn, you go to combat, then you go to your next turn, you get you go to the upkeep of the next turn, then you get the rebound effect, and then you get an extra turn for that spell, go to combat, cast another turn spell, go to the next turn at the beginning of that upkeep. See what I'm talking about?
Yeah, and you just it fuels itself by that point.
Yes. So now you just start chaining together. Like it's Azorius, so you have to go turns instead of combats.
Right.
But there's a lot of stuff that you could be doing with that, especially with your Dovescape backup.
You have the Dovescape lock. We've talked about land destruction a little bit. We've talked about my love for Winter Orb. The thing is, like, you don't need to do these at every table. Like, this is for, like, if you want to go against some really hard decks that are gonna combo, are gonna do really powerful things themselves. There are ways
I don't know. You're still on Voltron. I have a lot less mercy when I'm on Voltron. I'm like, yep.
So-
because everybody talks about Voltron, so it's just one of those like, hey, I thought I was playing a bad strategy. I thought I was playing a bad strategy. Everybody.
So I've played it enough where I have to actually hold back. I don't get to play my good Aurelia deck all that much because it's too much for most tables. And even then, like, Winter Orb isn't in the deck right now because it's just like too savage for, you know, most of what's going on that I'm playing against right now.
Yeah, no, I can agree. Like I was about to say, I'm like, I do some dumb, but I'm also not playing like, yeah.
And so that's where, like, you can use the same concept of, I need to stop my opponent, but it doesn't necessarily need to be Winter Orb. Like, a Hushbringer shuts off a lot of things, an Archon of Emeria is a great pickup, and it's pretty nasty. You can use a Drannith Magistrate if you want to, but just a couple key hate bears I find really slows people down. If you're wanting to stop value, something like a God Pharaoh statue isn't a hard lock, but it makes it much harder for people to play the game. So again, they have to use the removal on God Pharaoh statue and not on your commander. Redain is a nice new pickup that I've been messing with a little bit. And again, it's not a hard lock card, but it makes it harder for them to play these big spells or to chain multiple things together in a turn. And again, it's like, well, if they want to shoot Redain, they're not shooting my commander, and this is pretty awesome. So, you know, and
Yeah,
we talked about Silence a little bit. A card that I don't use, but if you wanted something like kind of in the middle, like Damping Sphere,
Yep.
you just want to stop people from like being able to do too much and trying to interact with you too much. Peter mentioned Grand Abolisher. There's games I've played where like Grand Abolisher is just an MVP. Everyone's sitting on a bunch of instant speed removal, and they're just like, oh wait, I can't do any of this.
That's why Dragon Lord Jamoka is so good.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Really good Voltron commander.
Yep.
I think we went back going back onto the clock.
Oh,
Where
yeah.
we were at. So one thing I wanted to bring up about the clock, like that we were kind of mentioning about the clock, at minimum, it was going to take at least 9 turns to kill a table. That's terrible.
Yeah. You don't want that.
So, or mono white, like attritions everybody out, pushes the game late to where Dakon is like 21-21. Sky Shark just goes bigger and
Bigger,
to the point
faster.
of where you are one-shotting. Like that's how Sky Shark cuts down the clock, is by becoming a 21-21 creature on turn 3 or 4.
Yeah,
Right.
you just have to keep in mind when you're playing, how do I want this game? And this is really good for any strategy. How do I want this game to play out? How do I want to control the tempo of this game? Do I want to accelerate the pace of this game, or do I want to slow this game way down? I'm a
And
slow
here-
this game way down person, but Nathan's a very much accelerate this game. Let's go faster.
I'm the aggressor, yes.
So I'm kind of in the middle of you two. I'm the mid-range deck. Like,
Right.
I want a couple hate bears. Like, I'm not trying to lock the game necessarily, unless I'm, you know, playing the really strong stuff. But I'm not trying to lock it. I'm just trying to slow them down a bit and just buy myself enough time to do the thing that I'm trying to do.
You're
We
playing.
got 3 representations of we basically have 3 representations of the archetype at this table.
Absolutely.
So, you know, clockwise, one thing that's interesting to talk about is that with Dakon, with Sky Shark, and with Ishai, is that they all continuously grow. There's definitely a value in that, and one thing we haven't touched on yet is just like, there's value in having the biggest creature on the table. It's not the only thing you need to do in a game, but there is value in having that.
And nobody literally is attacking you when you've got a 30-30 shark on the table.
Right, because the incentive is they're going to lose their best thing if they try to send it your way. Just like, nope, block that, kill it.
Yeah, and then of course is the fear of retaliation.
Right, yeah.
I have had people straight up not attack me because they're like, if I attack you, you're going to swing at me next, and you've got the bigger thing. And it's just like 100%.
Yep.
You touch me, and I will jump on you so goddamn hard. And like one of the benefits about Sky Shark, which is another thing that is beautiful about it, is the incidental life gain off of Shabraz.
Yes,
means
life
I can
gain's a big-
freely tap out, freely tap out and swing out, because I'm never gonna die on the crackback when I have 70 health.
Yeah. Peter, do you run things that give Dakon lifelink?
So with Dakon, I actually do something a little different. I have things like Mirren the Moaning Well, so that I've literally cast Dakon and sacrificed him right away to gain, 21 life or
Wow.
whatever. and stuff like that. So rather than relying on my combat step to gain the life, I have a sack outlet, or I've swordsed my own Dakon, because the great thing about Dakon is the deck is almost entirely control. You will run out of answers before I do. So I can use my own swords as a pay 1 mana, gain 20 life spell.
Yep.
So it's just a different, once again, it's just a different way. You don't have to revolve your Voltron deck completely around the combat step.
I used to have a Dakon Blackblade deck myself, and it wasn't a particularly great build. I just kind of jammed some equipments in there and some, like, it was my only Esper deck, so I'm like, oh, all the blue cards I never get to run. Anyway, I remember playing one game. It was a 5-player game, and I don't think Blackblade Reforged is out yet, but Dakon Blackblade was huge. I think there was a True Conviction in play or something, and I was gaining like 40 life every turn because it was like 20 double strike or something like that. And then the other 4 players at the table would just come back at me because like I was clearly ahead. And then I would lose 40 life, and then I would attack again and gain 40 life back. And we got into this like funny moment where the game kind of repeated itself for about 3 turns because I was gaining so much life back, and they couldn't do enough damage to get past the amount of life that I was gaining. And
that's also when you get great cards like Treasonous Ogre. Pay 3 life, add red mana.
Tricky card. It's a tricky card.
It is an absolute beast in Brawlin' and Shabraz.
If you're trying to turn 2, I can see that. If you're sustaining a longer game, I've had problems with it.
Oh, I'm here for a good time, not a long time. And like I've never had a problem with Brawlin' and Shabraz because like whenever you draw a card, you gain a life.
Yeah, makes sense. That makes sense.
You wheel, you gain 7 life. You then pay 9 life, get 3 red mana, wheel again.
Yeah, and one of the things I talk about a lot on my channel is just like, I love having lifelink in the command zone. And
oh yeah, lifelink and life gain, like it's another strategy that it itself is not something to build around, but incidental life gain can be so valuable when you are like, everybody's like punching you and they're like, why aren't you going down? And like, I don't know, I'm going to gain 6 life off this wheel.
Right. And it's not necessarily as valuable as like ramp and card draw, but life is a resource, and there is no reason not to take, some number of deck slots, maybe 2, maybe 3, to be able to create more of this resource. In a Voltron deck, it's usually just Luxodon Warhammer. You put a Luxodon Warhammer, maybe a True Conviction, and now you've got lifelink. And if you're hitting something big, not only you're doing more damage, you're getting the trample from the Warhammer or the double strike from True Conviction, good chance you're probably taking someone out. But if your life keeps shooting up, it's getting harder and harder for the other decks to take you out unless they have a combo of some sort that's going to just end it. So you're removing abilities from them where they can't just come in with a couple creatures and take you out now.
Yeah, it was just like we always worry about the Alpha Strike on the backlash, but like I've rarely seen Crater Hoofs. Like I have been like 8 Alpha Strike for like 25, and that's like enough to usually kill people. Like an Alpha Strike is usually about 30, 35 damage, like in save of like Crater Hoof, right?
Right.
But if you incidentally have like, I don't know, 50 health, like you survive that.
Yeah.
It's worth noting that you're on a different axis now. You're gaining life that they can't get through, but they're still at 21. That's not, they don't have a way to change that or affect that or do anything about that. Like, they're on 21. They can gain as much life as they want. It's irrelevant to you.
That's a great point. So one thing that I hate is, like, if I'm facing a Cabal deck or some other, like, black-white life gain deck, and I'm not playing Voltron, I'm like, oh, God, how are we going to get that damage through? That's like, they're at, like, 65 life right now. This deck just doesn't have 65 damage in it. Like, I like having that avenue of being like, all right, well, I just need to get 21 with the commander. You know what I mean? We can make that happen. I don't care what your life total is. It's a bad time if you're playing, or at least for me anyway, if you're playing against the life gain deck and you're just like, well, Voltron isn't an option for me right now because this deck doesn't do that. And
honestly, don't underestimate the power of a hidden Voltron strategy. One card can turn your commander into a Voltron commander, and that's the Blackblade.
Blackblade Reforged.
That card is fantastic. I have it in my Terranica deck, which is not a Voltron deck, but it turns into a Voltron deck pretty quickly when you equipped a Blackblade to it.
Right. So I think earlier I mentioned like having to go on the Pure Steel plan. The Pure Steel plan is not nearly as bad when Blackblade Reforged is involved. Just like, well, free equip that, now it's huge. Some other things I wanted to mention before we wrap up is a couple key spells. There's like a few spells that I've really kind of latched onto in the last year that just make me so happy when I'm playing Voltron. We started to talk about it a little bit with Bolt Bend, and deflecting SWAT if you have it, obviously, but it's expensive. I've got a lot of decks. Not every deck's going to have deflecting SWAT in it, so I started to look at stuff like Bolt Bend. It's made me think about going back to Wild Ricochet, where you change the target of the first spell, then copy that spell. And now you're kind of getting this protection effect, but you're also getting removal, and it's kind of card advantage because it's easy to 2-for-1 your opponents with that type of stuff. But another card that I really latched onto that I just love is Faith Shield, which is 1 white mana, target permanent gains protection from the color of your choice until end of turn. And it stops so many things. It stops a Rex Sage trigger that's trying to get like your Feast and Famine, your Sunforger, or your Winter Orb. It stops the damage from a Blasphemous Act, so your thing survives. It gives you protection from a color if you need to get that evasion just to get unblockable and swing through. And it's been so unbelievably good. And at 1 mana, I'm just like, I can't not run this.
Feather has entered the chat.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where it came from. It's from playing Feather, and I'm like, oh, this card's good. And he's like, you know what? I think I just need this as like, it's not something I can repeat in my other decks, but just as like
cards like that I want to play in are definitely must plays in a Shy.
Yeah, 100%. And then a couple other ones real quick are like a Chroma's Will, which is insane. And
Chroma's Will is stupid.
Yeah. It really is. I'm like, every ability? Cool, I'll take every ability. Like, for me, like I said, that equation is size and abilities. That's most of the equation right there.
Yo, shout out Teamer Battle Rage. Like, that's been there for, like, ever.
Yeah, that's been a classic.
Teamer Battle Rage just put more people in the ground from Voltron damage than, like, so many...
Yeah.
Feel free to use Tainted Strike as well.
Oh,
that's
God.
a good one to go along with that.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Peter, what about you? You got some special tech that you like?
My spiciest tech is in Dakon. I have a Magosi. It's the only extra turn spell. But because Dakon's pretty much a true control deck, you'll usually find a turn where you can skip your turn, and then you play Magosi, and that's my pseudo way to give Dakon haste with a land.
You're going to have to read that one to me because I don't know that one off the top of my head.
Oh, Magosi the Water Veil is a land. It enters the battlefield tapped. You can pay 1 blue, I believe. Yep. You'll pay 1 blue and tap it. You'll put an Aeon counter on it, and you'll skip your next turn. But then you'll tap to remove an Aeon counter. You'll return it to your hand, and you'll take an extra turn after this one. It's probably the fairest extra turn you can take in Magic the Gathering.
Okay.
But that's my sneaky way to give Dakon haste on a land, so it's not taking up a slot. There's not huge opportunity cost. It produces my blue mana. But people will forget that you skipped a turn, especially if you skip a turn kind of in the middle of the game, maybe turn 6 or 7, you can play a land. Or you can skip your turn if you don't have a land, or you can sneak a land on the battlefield with like a Druidic Satchel and play at instant speed. You can still draw your cards and stuff. But then you'll have an extra turn saved up for when you decide to inevitably cast your Dakon. And people have kind of forgotten about that. And suddenly you're taking out 2 people, or you're taking out 1 person by surprise with an extra turn.
Yeah.
It's not for every deck, but that's my spiciest Voltron suggestion.
Nice. We were just talking about it, and I was looking it up. A card that I don't use probably as much as I should, but should run more in Voltron is Hall of the Bandit Lord. You can run it in every deck. Now, the problem is it's $20, and I think it's only got 1 printing, but...
Yep.
I've also never been a fan of the life loss, because it is a lot of life loss if you just need to play it for mana. And you're like, ooh, that kind of feel that a bit. But in the right deck, haste is so important for Voltron, and Hall of the Bandit Lord gives you that on a land that can go in any deck. So
yeah, in that same vein though, lands, make sure you're thinking about your lands when you're building Voltron. Mirror in the Moaning Well's great. Rogue's Passage is phenomenal. Thespian Stage gives you 2 of all of those effects, which is really great. So like your mana base, you don't have to go easy on it.
Not what's the other one? Inventor's Fair.
Yes. Inventor's Fair is phenomenal.
For me personally, for my deck is I use a lot of pain lands and like fast lands like Ancient Tomb, because like Shark gains so much life that like I can just freely spend to have like the perfect mana base. 'Cause I'm running like every pain land and I never have a problem for colors, and I'm like tapping Ancient Tomb every single turn.
Yeah, you guys were talking about lands. There's a couple that I have to run if I'm playing Voltron. The first one's going to be Homeward Path, because you really don't want your stuff getting stolen.
Yeah, Homeward Path is brutal. Getting your Shabraz, like, for me in, like, CDH, it's getting something Gilded Draked.
Yeah, gross. It's so gross. For me, the problem is, like, because I play Aurelia a lot, it's not just that they're stealing Aurelia, it's also that they're probably about to win when they do that. So having a Homeward Path ready to go for something that might do that is a big deal. We're talking about it a bunch.
I ended up cutting that from Shabraz because there was no way, like, there's no way for me to, like, get it. I just figured it's easy. I just packed more targeted removal so I could, like, just bounce or...
Yeah,
like,
if you can bounce it back to your hand, that works.
Yeah, it's like I'm running, because I have, like, that CDH mentality, like, I'm running almost every 2 mana permanent bounce that I possibly can.
Yep.
Like, Into the Royal, Blink of an Eye, Winds of Rebuke, just, like, I'm taking that. Because, like, that also lets me bounce my own dockside.
Yeah, that's a thing, too.
Cyclonic Rift doesn't let you bounce your own dockside.
Right.
But, like, casting dockside 2 or 3 times is, like, amazing. If you haven't bounced and replayed dockside, I highly recommend doing that.
I need to do that. I haven't played it. I just haven't played the decks that, like, do that, so that'll be on my to-do list. Some other lands that, like, I won't run without are Hainware Garrison or Hainware Battlements, the Battlements, I think, and Flamekin Village. Again, both haste lands. Haste is so important.
I got around not having haste by casting Shabraz on turn 1.
Yeah, there you go. And then I think the final one is probably in Boros decks or Mardu decks, Sunholm, just being able to give yourself double strike. What lands do you need to have when you're playing Voltron?
For me, Rogue's Passage is up high on the list.
Oh, yeah, I forgot that one. That's a great one.
Shurei's Death Storehouse. It's the Kamigawa land that gives fear.
Yeah.
Death Storehouse. It gives fear, which is a really nice ability. There are some limitations to fear, but once again, just ways to give unblockable on your lands are so nice. Utility lands really maximize your deck slots, especially in Voltron, where you don't want to devote an entire card to giving your commander unblockable, because that card becomes dead if you don't have your commander. But if it's a land, I mean, you're producing mana, it's doing all kinds of other stuff.
You want to what? You want a 1-2 punch I've really come to like in most Voltron decks is Tome of Legends for the card draw, and then running Manifold Key to untap the Tome of Legends or give your commander unblockable when it's time to do that.
Yep. Key to the City is also really nice as both card draw and unblockable, form of unblockable.
My favorite is just giving something trample.
Trample feels good because it's that kind of feeling of unblockable. You just I just do all this damage to you and you probably die. Trample is the they got to start doing math and how many blockers do they have, and you're probably gonna kill a whole bunch of things. It feels awesome.
It's it's unblockable. No, I'm just gonna swing at you with I don't worry about lands as much as I worry about giving my 30/30 trample. Unblockable, yeah, whatever. Eat this.
Sorry.
Well, I was gonna say there's no interaction really to unblockable. It's just I guess I take a lot of damage and I die. That happens. With trample, it's there's still points to interact with blockers and how much damage is gonna go through, and it's just more exciting, I think.
It just feels good. Just suck it. Just eat all of this. Just blah. Turn it sideways and say you deal with the mathematics.
Yep. Yeah. Exactly. So they have to deal with the math where when it's unblockable, it's just I'm probably just dead. So the numbers don't.
Yeah. I have never had to give Shabraz unblockable when I have trample in the command zone, which is I guess my tip is try and find something with evasion so you don't need to put anything in the land base.
Some really important lands in addition to if you want to run unblockable lands is Field of Ruin, Strip Mine, because one big weakness we didn't talk about earlier is Maze of Ith.
Yes.
And other similar effects. Hexproof also does it. Hexproof is also great, but things that can destroy that land are very nice to have. And then two, really, if you're looking for some really deep cuts, they don't produce mana, so I don't really include them in a land slot. They're just happen to be lands. One is Arena. It's pay 3 tap. You tap a creature, and one of your opponents taps a creature, and then they fight each other. And it's just a really flavorful way to remove a creature in Voltron. And Safe Haven. Safe Haven works like an Endless Sands, where you put your creature under the Safe Haven or the Endless Sands, and then you can sacrifice the Safe Haven or Endless Sands to get your creature back. So it's just a little form of protection that gives you a free recast on your commander.
Yep. I should try Arena. It might be a little bit too, I guess, like feel badsy when it's like, well, it's a land that doesn't make mana, and I just really need the mana right now. I don't know
I finally cut it from Dakon. Dakon got to the point where it was a good enough card that like I started having to make some flavor cuts, which was or with a good enough deck I had to make some flavor cuts, which was really heartbreaking. But Arena just sits in the box now so that I can look at it and appreciate how cool the card is.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Another land, one that I wanted to mention on newer one, is Bonder's Enclave. Has been really good.
That's a great one.
Because your commander is almost always going to be above 4 power if you're on Voltron, or at least some creature in play is. So it's a great piece of card draw. All the utility lands, by the way, all get so much better if you're running Sword of Feast and Famine, which sucks because Sword of Feast and Famine is really expensive, but it powers up your utility lands so much. And like with Aurelia and Double Strike, like if I have Aurelia and Double Strike and Feast and Famine, I can activate my lands so many times and I can draw like 4 cards just on that. So like that's a big thing too. And I wish Feast and Famine were cheaper, but unfortunately it's not. We've talked about it a little bit. We started talking about evasion. Evasion is like one of the high priority things you want on your Voltron commander. So
yeah, because like there are so many ways to make your creature huge, which is like a lot easier than trying to spend more cards to give it evasion.
Yep.
Which is like why Rograk is great, because you can slam equipment on it and it's already got first strike, trample, and menace. Like Ashai has flying, Shabraz has flying, and Brawlin can give it trample. And on the other end, like Shabraz can give Brawlin flying. Like
yeah.
these are all amazing. Like I don't have to worry about diluting my card quality in my card pool because like, I have it in the command zone. So like when you're trying to find something, try and find it and put it in the command zone.
Yep. Yeah, just evasion is such like a, I have kind of a priority of abilities that I want on my commander, and evasion is one of the first things you want on your Voltron commander. And then, there's like other secondary things that you want later, like First Strike is cool. It's not necessarily game breaking, but it's nice to have. But
First Strike is not as good as Double Strike.
Right. Exactly. I'd rather have Double Strike because it scales up your damage, and also
and above that, I'd rather have flying.
Right. So, if you can get like flying and Double Strike, then you're like, all right, we got evasion. We've got a thing that's more damage and more size and more combat effectiveness.
Well, yeah, one is the evasion and the other one cuts down the clock.
Yep. And Double Strike's good too because it also, if you're using swords, it allows you to generate more value off the swords. So it's doing a lot of things. It's like one of the best abilities you can have in a Voltron deck.
Shout out to Vigilance too. Vigilance is really nice to have, especially if you're pairing your Voltron strategy with things like Ghostly Prison or Crawl Space. Then having Vigilance means that you're attacking with your one creature, and they're maybe swinging back with 1 or 2 creatures. So, but like, do they want to? Because you have your giant blockers still.
Right, they're gonna lose the best thing they're sending at you, and that's a huge deal. So yeah, if you can get to like get your first evasion ability, get some Double Strike, and then get Vigilance on there, that's a fantastic place to be. And then probably like the 4th thing that I'm looking for is Lifelink, because I want to start gaining that life just to make it harder for people to swing at me.
Lifelink and Vigilance are really close. Probably Lifelink and then Vigilance for me, but they're right neck and neck.
Yeah, and it depends on your deck colors and your priorities and stuff like that too. When I was doing the Bruce Tarl thing, I have used it at points because you can gain a lot of life. I was actually using Aetherflux Reservoir in the deck because it's one really good counterspell. And someone's going to try to blow your board up. I'm like, okay, I'll go to 4 life and kill you. And you know what I mean? It's another like win condition / counter spell. It wasn't always the most consistent, but again, I like having lifelink in the command zone because, it's a resource, and gaining more of that resource allows you to do certain things.
Bruce Tarl is actually uniquely played in CDH because of the life gain.
Yep.
Because life gain means more cards off of ad nauseum.
Yep.
But that's a side point. Life gain can be good if you are going to use it.
Right. So yeah, we mentioned the evasion. Evasion, the kind of the big ones are flying, trample, unblockable. Menace is very reasonable. It's not going to carry you through the entire game, but there's definitely points of the game where Menace is very handy to have. So I definitely like some of those. We talked about protection a little bit earlier. Protection's always the tricky one because other than Teferi's protection, there isn't really a single protection effect that protects you from every single thing. So just looking at like keywords, we talked about Maze of Ith. Maze of Ith is really scary when you're a Voltron deck, and that's where you want Hexproof, and that's where you probably want like Swiftfoot Boots or Champion's Helm. are both really good for that. But you've also got Shroud from Lightning Greaves. Can be a little bit tricky if you're doing the equipment thing.
Have to be very careful.
Yeah. Regenerate is an interesting one. It doesn't show up in a lot of like common places. Like it doesn't show up on the swords or anything like that, so you don't see it a ton, but is very reasonable.
Regenerate is best when it's on your commander, I think.
Yes.
Corlash, Lord Tressorhorn are both good commander or good Voltron commanders with Regenerate, which is just an inherent form of protection.
Yeah. So, like as I'm going through that priority of abilities that I want to get on my commander after we get some evasion, after some lifelink, now we want to talk about protecting him. And, it's tricky with protection because you need like multiple forms of it if you really want to stay protected from everything. But Regenerate is very solid in that it gets you around destroy effects and damage. Protection is useful against damage, but also doubles as evasion, which is super sweet, and also can shut off targeted stuff if it's the right color. And then there's Indestructible, and these are the kind of the two that I wrestle with a lot, is protection from a color versus Indestructible, because you kind of need both. Indestructible is generally bad against a lot of spot removal, because a lot of spot removal now is exile or bounce, but Indestructible is really good against the board wipes. But protection, or protection from a color or hexproof, are really good against spot removal, but doesn't save you from the board wipe. So you kind of need like two elements of protection to really be protected from like a lot of what people are running. And then the final one that I think comes up somewhat often is Totem Armor. There's a couple really good auras that have totem armor on them that just a nice protection effect to have around. You don't care why it dies, it's going to come back, or it's going to stay in play rather.
Yeah, Sigarda.
And we haven't talked about, you can do Voltron built around auras. It just becomes inherently trickier because auras it can be an inherent form of card disadvantage.
Right, you're losing
when
cards.
you eventually lose it, it is terrible, but that's where there's only like a couple of commanders I would ever consider doing the aura strategy with, and it's specific commanders that are going to stick like glue to the board.
Yep. You're a Miststalker.
Yep.
Yeah, Sigarda like is like my favorite because not even Fleshbag gets rid of her. It's like you could literally play one creature Sigarda.
Tamio is such a good planeswalker for Voltron strategies. She has a passive that means you can't sack or discard a card.
Yeah.
It's just a diversification of your threats. She can get you back cards. Like, don't sleep on the 4-mana Tamio as another form of protection.
Also remember, your opponents can't kill you if they can't draw cards. Narset.
Yeah. I always think the protection elements of a deck are interesting because there are a lot of choices, especially when you're in white. Now, I was playing a mono red deck the other day, and I'm like, where's all my protection effects? I have no protection. I feel so naked. My permanents are just exposed to whatever people want to play. This feels awful. But there's also like spell-based protection. We talked about like Faith Shield and that sort of stuff. There's also weird cards like Brought Back and Faith's Reward that you can use. They're not my favorite, but they do a job. And, if you're just trying to keep your stuff in play, it's one way to do it. You've got the classic spells too, like Boros Charm and Heroic Intervention, which are very useful.
Things like Sajiri's Step Now, printed in Zendikar. Zajiri's Glacier.
Yep.
And it's the one that it's a protection spell on the front half. It flips over into a land on the back half. Very good. Sajiri's Step is a fine card. I think that's the one that's a land and enters the battlefield and gives a creature protection. Can't use it at instant speed usually, but lets you get an attacker through. That's the great thing about protection, is it can also be a form of evasion.
Yeah, and I like the swords a lot. It is not uncommon for me to have protection from 3 or 4 colors, and it's such a great feeling. It's a really great feeling when you have all 5. You're just like, protection from all colors, cool. Damage, don't care about it. Creatures, don't care about them unless they're colorless. Blasphemous Act, nope. But, you bring up a good point, is that now there's so many options in white that there are more options than I can run in the deck. I love Faith Shield because it's any permanent, which means I can keep Winter Orb and Feast and Famine and Sunforger alive. Sajiri Glacier is nice because it's a land, but it only protects creatures. So I've been kind of like, maybe. I've definitely run it in some spots, and it's been good. But now that also competes with Akroma's Will. And Akroma's Will is protection, lifelink. It's also a finisher because of the flying double strike. So, like, it kind of does everything. And we're kind of getting to a place where, like, okay, now if I'm also running Teferi's protection in the deck, that's more card slots than I want to devote to protection effects. I wasn't planning to devote 5 or 6 things to, like, just spell-based protection, but they're all really good cards. And so now there's kind of like, you have these options. You have these options available to you. And if you add red to the equation, you get Deflecting Swap, Bolt Bend, and some other stuff that can all be really, really good. So the protection element of a deck is super important because, especially if you're playing one of the bigger commanders like Gwyn or Aurelia, then you got to keep them in play. If you're having to recast them for 8 mana, it's a really bad time. And Gwyn in particular is very slow. So it's hard for you. You kind of lose tempo to the board having to do that.
Right.
What about you guys? You guys have any finishing thoughts before we wrap up?
Voltron, talk, get hit.
Nice.
I can't compete with the succinctness of that response, but I'll say I think the biggest takeaway is think about what you want to be doing and build your Voltron shell from that. So think about what type of magic
that is
you like
much smarter advice.
and build your Voltron deck around that.
Yeah. So people focus on the negative aspects of it. What does it lose to? Those are easy hurdles to overcome. You can put cards in your deck that make you not lose to the Fleshbag Marauder or whatever, or the Crater Hoof, or the Torment, or the Adnaz, or whatever the case is. You know, if you plan ahead of time and be like, okay, I need something that deals with this.
If you know your meta very well, Voltron is going to do well for you because you always know who's going to be the threat. And your threat assessment is going to be better. You're going to know what to play out. You're going to know if you're going to race, are we going to stall? Because you know the game. Like running into a blind meta, that's one thing. But if you know your play groups, like a Voltron deck could easily take over and become the threat. It's like, oh, I know you're playing Silas Wren and whoever. Yeah, you're the threat. Boom, you're out on 1. Okay, next.
You know what the worst for me is? The worst for me is because, like, you know, the channel and stuff, people know what I play, so they know my decks, and they're like, no, you can't have that Mask of Memory. I'm not letting you draw all those cards. Shoot that. I'm like, ooh, kind of needed that. So I tend to have more success in open metas because people don't know my decks intimately because, you know, my decks are all on video, so...
That's how Dakon works. Is a lot of times I have to explain to people, like, I'm going to look like I'm not doing anything. I'm doing something, trust me. Because people just won't do anything to me because I'm just not casting, like, threats, so they think that I'm, you know, flooded or,
right,
you know, drawing a bad hand. But I'm like, nope, this is exactly what I want to be doing.
I just turbo slam. My biggest love of this deck that I've been playing recently is that I've made people afraid of Shabraz.
Yeah.
Like,
Dude,
Shabraz is
card,
not
man.
the one that you're supposed to be afraid of. It's supposed to be it's supposed to be brawling.
CDH players aren't naturally scared of big creatures. It's just not a thing they run into a lot of. So
CDH players aren't naturally as scared of big creatures until all of a sudden one hits the table and then it takes over.
right, because it's just like, I have nothing for this. All my cards are for stopping combos, not for killing
Like
big creatures.
People will come to me and they're like, Elish Norn is a CDH card. I'm like, Elish Norn is one of the biggest. If you resolve a turn 2 Elish Norn, GG.
I mean, it doesn't really even matter what turn it is. Like, you resolve Elish Norn, no one can cast their commander. Most of the creatures on the battlefield die.
Yeah, like
No more Dockside combos.
Yeah, Dockside's off.
Everything in no, actually,
not always. Sometimes they use it as a sack
man.
outlet, and that's not ideal. I've had that happen.
Yeah. I'm like, you play your Dockside into your Elish Norn, it dies. You get a whole bunch of treasures. Reanimate it with Kenrith.
Yep.
Man, that card is just so good.
Yeah.
Dockside?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dockside is amazing, but like I have made people afraid of a slot flying shark. So where you guys go, it doesn't look like I'm doing much. I am like the aggressor. On turn 1, slamming a sky shark, and on turn 2, I am wheeling, and I now have a flying 10/10, and I'm going, someone's about to die.
Yeah, and you know, like, I've had a lot of success with Boros, and for me, that best spot is like when I was at those tables, at the CDH tables, and everyone's just holding the counterspell, waiting for that big counterspell battle to happen, and I'm just like, okay, swing with the Kiri, and they're like, yeah, that's fine, I guess, because everyone was on guard against Flash Hulk at that point in time, so you're like, well, anything that's not Flash Hulk is probably just going to survive, and it's a good time. Anyway, I think we're going to wrap it up there. So, talked about a lot of awesome things today. You know, one of my favorite strategies as well. In fact, probably, like, I have 12 paper decks, and like 10 of them are Voltron decks. So, maybe I need to mix it up and do something else once in a while, but I don't know. Anyway, I want to thank you guys for joining today. Peter, where can people find your stuff?
Yeah, I'm at Mono White Border on Twitter, and from there you can find everything about me, including my Circle of Protection blog, monowhiteborder.weebly.com.
Sweet. And Nathan, where can people find your stuff?
You can find me on Twitter at the Hermit Druid or at TikTok at OKChef, because I don't believe my branding is terrible. And yeah, you hit me up there for pretty much anything doing related to CDH or EDH content.
Sweet. All right. Well, I'm going to wrap it up there. Thank you guys for joining, and thank you all of you for listening. Maybe this will show up as an outtake or something, but with Sword of Vengeance, it has this really cool ability where, because it has all these keywords on it, it sort of gives the creature you attach it to this entirely new character. It becomes something else entirely because it has so many keywords on it, because haste, trample, first strike, and vigilance, so it attacks, it blocks. You're probably not going to beat it in combat because of the first strike, and it just does a lot.
Yeah, it's something we didn't talk about, but like doing Voltron with a non-legendary creature, you're not commander, is something you can definitely do. It's a lot harder because you're dealing 40 damage, but I've totally souped up something other than my commander for various reasons.
Yeah, and Sword of Vengeance does a lot of work when that has to happen.
Yeah, sometimes you need to equip to the creature that has the Sword of Vengeance already, and you don't need to switch over everything to your commander.
Yep.
And that's totally fine.
Yeah, and that's also a big deal, when I talked about I don't want my opponents at 40 on turn 8, because if they're at 25, I'm okay, I can get to 13 and double strike it. That's a thing that I can do.
Yeah, because you don't always have to win. Your Voltron deck doesn't always win via commander damage. It's just the primary strategy.
Yeah.
It's not the only strategy.
Yeah, Lord knows I've blown up enough people with Chandra's Ignition. That's also it's a great card for me because nobody feels bad losing to that card.
I gotta put that back in Aurelia because I've been cheating on removal in Aurelia a little bit. I've gotten so proactive. I'm I don't have as much removal as I used to, and I think that's gonna be a great tool because even these days, even at a casual table, 5 or 6 in the mid game can take out most things.
I just love blowing people the up with it.
Do you run Fall of the Hammer or Soulsfire?
Fall of the Hammer. What does that do?
Damage to a creature equal to creature's power.
No, I run Fling.
Oh, you run Fling? Okay, yeah. It's a feather card.
I recently cut Fling. I put in the new one from the Zendikar, the one that's the 3-mana Fling effect that you can also play as a tap land.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
That's just a strict upgrade for me.
Sweet.
It's still instant speed Fling. To me, that was a counter spell, but that's funnier.
One card you might want to look at is Impact Resonance.
What does that do?
It's a 2-mana red instant that gives you damage to creatures equal to the amount of the largest amount of damage dealt to a permanent or player this turn. So if you hit someone for 7, you get 7 damage that you can spread to any number of creatures.
Interesting.
Check it out. It might be interesting for you.